The sky over Fort Moore was still gray at 5:30 when Lieutenant Mason Cade saw the older man step into the formation. 41, maybe 42, gray creeping into the hair at his temples, a faded tactical shirt, worn boots. Cade laughed, loud enough for the whole line to hear. "Old man shouldn't be here. Wrong line, sir. Old folks' home is back that way." Two of the younger officers snickered. The older man said nothing. He bent down, retied his bootlaces, and pulled the strap on his weighted pack one notch tighter. From the observation tower, Major Claire Whitman watched the line. She said nothing. The starter's whistle cut through the cold. If you're new to the channel, take a second to subscribe before this one gets to the part nobody on that field will forget. Now back to the formation. 10 days earlier, in the empty gymnasium of Carver High School in Columbus, Georgia, Ethan Marsh was on his back under a broken pull-up rig, tightening a stripped bolt with one hand and holding a flashlight in his teeth. The sound of crayons on paper came from the bleacher steps. His daughter, Lily, 8 years old, was drawing horses again. "Dad," she said, "Mrs. Patterson is here." He slid out from under the rig. The neighbor stood by the gym door, gray cardigan, reading glasses on a chain. She held up a folded flyer. "Saw this at the post office. Thought of you." Ethan wiped his hands on a rag, took the page, and read. Fort Moore. Senior Combat Skills Instructor, civilian contract. Salary 3 times what the school paid him. He glanced at Lily, then at the flyer, then at Lily again. "They want somebody who can run a course," Mrs. Patterson said. "Lily told me last week piano lessons start in the fall." Ethan folded the paper and slid it into his back pocket. 3 days later, in the training operations office on the 3rd floor of Building 4, Major Claire Whitman opened a file folder and read the page on top. Service history, 17 years, honorable, unit, classified, Department of Defense authorization, required for disclosure. She looked up from the page. The man across from her sat very still, hands on his knees, eyes on her without staring. "Mr. Marsh," she said, "this position requires you to pass 4 evaluations equivalent to those for active duty officers: physical, marksmanship, navigation, tactical exercise. You are 41. Do you understand the standard?" "I understand. Have you held a weapon since your separation?" "At a range. Not in a tactical setting." She made a note. "The evaluation begins in 7 days. You'll be housed in transient quarters. Report to Building 7, 0500 Monday." He stood, took the paperwork she offered, and walked out without looking back. Whitman watched the door close. Then she signed the training evaluation authorization at the bottom of the form and sent the folder down the hall to civilian personnel. Lieutenant Colonel Bradford Hayes opened the same folder 20 minutes later. He read the same line, unit classified, and the corner of his mouth tightened. He signed. After Whitman's name went out of the building, he picked up his desk phone and dialed a number that did not appear in any directory. "I've got an odd one," he said. "Might be worth a look." The next morning, Ethan walked the long hallway between Building 4 and the transient quarters with his duffel over one shoulder. Lieutenant Cade and 3 other young officers stood near the coffee machine. Cade stepped into the aisle, blocking him. "Sir, you sure you're in the right building?" "Retirement paperwork's over in C." Ethan walked around him without breaking stride. Master Sergeant Theodore Brennan watched from the doorway of the duty office, 54 years old, 31 of them in uniform, and something in the way Marsh moved through that hallway, center of gravity low, shoulders soft, pulled at a memory he could not quite name. That night in the transient room, Ethan opened his laptop and called home. Lily held up a sheet of paper to the camera. "White horse, with a fence. That's a good one, baby. Mrs. Patterson says you'll be gone 2 weeks. Just a couple of weeks. Then I'm back." After the call ended, he sat for a long time looking out the window at the dark parking lot. His left hand moved without thinking to the inside of his right wrist, where a small tattoo, a winged dagger no longer than a thumb, rested under the cuff of his sleeve. Monday, 0500. The formation that opened this story stood on the cold asphalt. 23 candidates, weighted packs, 5 miles of paved track and trail ahead of them. The whistle blew. The young officers surged. Cade led the front cluster for the first mile. Ethan held the back of the pack. Even pace, short breaths. He did not look up. By mile 3, the front cluster had broken into 3 groups. Cade was in the second now, mouth open, sweat dark on his shirt. Ethan moved past him on the inside of a turn, said nothing, kept his pace. At mile 4, on the long downhill where the trail dropped through pine, Brennan stood on a rise with binoculars. He watched Marsh come down the slope. Short steps, knees low, weight kept over the lead foot. No wasted energy. The technique was not something taught in a basic infantry course. It was something taught in mountain selection schools, in week-long ruck phases, where men washed out from the small mistakes that compounded across 30 miles. Brennan lowered the binoculars. He turned to the corporal beside him. Pull his file. The original, not the summary. Marsh crossed the finish 4 minutes and 11 seconds ahead of the second-place candidate, a 28-year-old captain from 1st Battalion. He was not winded. He set his pack down, drank from a canteen, and sat on the curb to wait. Whitman stood on the observation deck above the finish, clipboard in one hand. She watched the seconds tick over on the digital timer, and then looked at Marsh, then back at the timer. Her eyebrow moved once. That afternoon, in the shoot house, Hayes had quietly rearranged the schedule. Marsh was now assigned to the 4 o'clock run, when sun glare cut hardest through the windows along the east wall. Whitman caught the change on her clipboard and walked it down to Hayes's office. Colonel, the schedule I signed this morning did not have him in the 4 slot. I made a small adjustment. For fairness, she wrote something in her notebook, closed it, and did not argue in front of the candidate who was waiting in the hall. Marsh entered the shoot house. 18 targets, mixed civilian and threat, 60-second window. He came out with 18 confirmed in the kill zone. 0 civilians struck, including the new target Hayes had added that morning, a small mannequin holding a stuffed bear, placed 3 feet from a threat target. Cade went next, 16 of 18, 1 civilian hit. After the last run, Brennan walked into Whitman's office and set his notebook on her desk. The page was open to handwritten lines. Major. I saw this technique once. Afghanistan, 2011. The man who used it didn't have a name on any roster I was cleared to see. Marsh isn't a civilian, or he hasn't been one for very long. Whitman opened the file folder again. Her finger stopped on the line that said Unit Classified. She did not answer immediately. That evening, alone in her office, she opened the bottom drawer of her desk and took out a wood-framed photograph. Her father in Marines dress blues. 1998. She set the frame in front of her on the desk and looked at it for a long time. At the same hour, Ethan sat on the concrete step outside the transient quarters with his phone in his hand. A text from Mrs. Patterson. Lily's asleep. She said tonight she dreamed about her mom. Said her mom was laughing. He read it twice. He put the phone in his pocket. He looked up at the stars. In a darker office on the other side of the building, Hayes opened a new email. The recipient field was an address he had used twice before, Prater.intake, no name attached. He attached a scanned copy of Marsh's file and pressed send. The land navigation exercise began at 2100 Tuesday night. 12 miles through wooded terrain, 6 checkpoints, 25 kilopacks, paper map and compass only. Rain started 10 minutes after the first candidate stepped off. Brennan had collected the backup GPS units before launch. Hayes objected. Whitman supported Brennan with a single sentence from the course requirements binder. Per spec colonel, Ethan left 4th in the order. He did not push. Every 20 minutes he stopped, oriented his map under a red filtered light, and moved on. He reached the 4th checkpoint at 01:17, 43 minutes ahead of expected pace. A quarter mile after checkpoint 4, somewhere in the dark to his left, a sound caught his attention. A short cry cut off, then a longer one. He listened. The terrain dipped toward a creek bed. Radio reception there was effectively 0. He did not call. He turned off the trail and moved toward the sound. He found First Lieutenant Sarah Vega in 18 minutes. She had slipped crossing the creek, and her left ankle was angled wrong below the boot. Her pack had pulled her into the rocks, and the side of her face was scraped raw. She was conscious. She was angry, mostly at herself. He set his pack down, opened the medical roll, immobilized the ankle with a triangle bandage, and shaped a stretcher from his rain shell and 2 saplings. He carried her 1 8/10 miles to the nearest road point, where the medic on standby could reach them. He handed her off. He drank water. He went back to the trail. He still finished first. Oh, 2:44. Brennan was at the finish line. Ethan's shirt was soaked, and Vega's blood was dark on his shoulder. Brennan did not say anything. He just reached out and took the pack. Whitman came out from the command tent. You carried her out. Anyone there would have. No, Whitman said. I've been standing at this finish line for 6 years. Not anyone. The final assessment came Thursday morning. Hostage rescue in a simulated structure. 4-person teams. Ethan was assigned as team leader of a stick that included Cade. Cade objected to Hayes in front of the candidates. Hayes smiled. Let Marsh lead. Let's see what the man can do. The team stacked outside the building. Ethan called the entry through the side door rather than the front breach point everyone else had chosen. He moved his team in a sequence none of them had drilled, but that all of them understood the moment he spoke it. 6 threat targets neutralized in 47 seconds. 3 hostage mannequins recovered intact. 0 friendly casualties. Cade came out of the building silent. Vega, back from medical and watching from the tower, spoke into the radio. Sir, where did you learn that entry? Long time ago, Ethan said. I forget the rest. That night, Brennan went down to the base archive. Fort Moore had been a transit hub for joint special operations between 2015 and 2018. He pulled a binder, an after-action report, partially declassified in 2024, Northern Syria. June 2017. The commanding officer's name had been redacted. The technical summary had not. Side entry breach. 47-second neutralization. 3 civilians recovered. 0 friendly casualties. The last page bore the declassification authorization signature. Brigadier General Marcus Holloway. Brennan set his pen down. He picked up his phone and dialed Whitman. Major. The general comes for the closing ceremony next Tuesday. He has to see Marsh in person. 6 days later, the closing ceremony assembled on the small parade field behind Building 1. 23 candidates in formation. Hayes at the podium. Whitman beside him, silent. The partially declassified report sat folded in her uniform pocket. Major General Marcus Holloway stepped out of his sedan with 2 aides. He shook Hayes's hand. He turned to Whitman and held her eyes for a second longer than the courtesy required. She did not speak. He walked down to the line of candidates. Hayes began his speech. Praise for the next generation of officers. The standard phrases. The standard rhythm. He did not mention Marsh by name. Holloway walked the line. He stopped in front of each candidate, gave the small nod of acknowledgement and moved on. When he reached the 7th man, he stopped longer. The June morning was warming. Ethan stood at attention. The cuff of his uniform shirt had ridden up half an inch on his left wrist. The tattoo was visible. Winged dagger, dark ink, the size of a thumb. Holloway did not move for several seconds. Hayes's speech continued behind them. The air on the parade field had changed, and he had not yet noticed. Holloway spoke quietly. Only the first rank heard him. Captain. Hayes stopped mid-sentence. Separated, sir, Ethan said. Just Mr. Marsh now. Holloway looked at the tattoo for another long beat. Then he turned to the captain at his shoulder. Call the formation to attention. The order rang out. 23 candidates snapped from parade rest to attention. Hayes stood very still at the podium. Holloway addressed the field. He did not raise his voice, and he did not name a single operation. Mr. Marsh and I worked together 9 years ago. I cannot tell you where, and I cannot tell you what, but I can tell you this. The tattoo on his wrist cannot be faked, and the men who wear it are not many. He is one of the reasons 3 United States citizens are alive today. That is the only public sentence I will say about it. He extended his hand. Ethan took it. It was not a salute. It was the handshake of 2 men who had once stood in a room that 7 people on Earth knew about. Holloway turned to Hayes. Colonel, Mr. Marsh's evaluation will be processed by the book. No exceptions. No delays. I want the paperwork on my desk by Friday. Yes, sir. After the ceremony, Whitman found Ethan in the parking lot, stowing his pack in the bed of his pickup. She did not ask about Syria. She asked what his daughter's name was. Lily. 8. She draws horses. She nodded. Master Sergeant David Whitman. Marines. Killed in Fallujah when I was 14. My mother never took her ring off. A long pause. Neither of them looked at the other. Ethan closed the tailgate. Thank you for not refusing the service when you were first called. Whitman said. "Thank you for not letting Hayes push me off this field before I had the chance to stand on it." She walked with him to the driver's door. The truck bed had a tarp folded square in the corner, the way men with daughters folded things, and a child's booster seat strapped in the back of the cab. She looked at the booster seat. She did not comment on it. "Holloway will want an answer on the position by Monday," she said. "I know. Take the weekend. Talk to your daughter." Ethan drove out the front gate. In the rearview mirror, she was still watching. On the passenger seat sat an unopened envelope, Senior Combat Skills Instructor, civilian contract, unsigned. 3 days later, on a sidewalk in downtown Columbus, Ethan watched his daughter run through the school's front gate, with her backpack bouncing behind her. His phone rang. He turned away from the playground to answer. "Marsh, it's Whitman." An investigative reporter at the Atlanta paper filed a Freedom of Information request this morning. "Your name?" 4 very specific questions about Operation Iron Wren, detail only somebody with file access would know to ask. Ethan stood on the sidewalk a long moment, watching Lily disappear into the building. The cold he felt was not for himself. It was for a promise made in a hospice room 3 years ago, and a woman who would never know whether he had kept it. "Hayes? That's what we think. Counterintelligence is pulling his communication logs now." Within 48 hours, they had it. Hayes had emailed Marsh's file to an address belonging to Prater Group, a private military consultancy headquartered in Northern Virginia. The same address had received 17 other personnel files over the previous 4 years, each one belonging to a former special operations soldier whose service record had been classified. Holloway summoned Hayes to his office. He laid 3 documents on the desk: the email log, a warranted record of Hayes's phone call to the reporter, the list of 17 other names. "You have 2 options," Holloway said. "Retire by end of business, cooperate fully with the Department of Justice investigation into Prater Group, and you may avoid a federal sentence, or hold this office 1 more hour and face court-martial under Title 18, Section 798, next week." Hayes signed the papers in 20 minutes. He walked out of Holloway's office with his retirement packet under his arm and the cooperation agreement folded inside it. 2 military police officers waited in the corridor and escorted him to his car. He did not return to his office. The locks were changed before lunch. Brennan dug deeper. Prater was not just buying files. They were assembling something they referred to internally as the Ghost Roster, a compiled list of operators whose presence in classified operations could not be found through normal public records. The roster was being sold to private security firms for recruitment purposes. Some of it, intelligence officers feared, was being sold further down the chain to interested third parties who simply wanted to know who had been where. Whitman called Ethan late that night. He was in the kitchen at home in Columbus, washing dishes one-handed. "Marsh, your file was one of more than 200, and they matched your name to Iron Wren." He set the plate down in the sink. On the refrigerator, held by a magnet shaped like a sunflower, was Lily's most recent drawing. White horse, brown fence. "What about the people we brought out of that op?" 2 of the journalists have been gone for years. "Cancer. Heart. Natural. There's 1 survivor." "Where?" A pause on the line. "Ann Arbor, Michigan. Freshman pre-med at the University of Michigan. Her name is Layla Nasser. She filed a report with campus police this morning. She says 2 men have been following her for 3 days." Ethan stood at the kitchen sink. Lily was asleep in the bedroom down the hall. He opened the upper cabinet, the one he had not opened in 3 years, and lifted down the canvas pack he had not touched since the day he had left active service. He dialed Mrs. Patterson. "Can you watch Lily for a few days?" Something came up. Whitman drove to Columbus before sunrise and picked him up at the curb in front of his house. She had cleared the trip through Holloway in the small hours. Joint Coordination, Army Training Command, and the FBI Detroit Field Office. 2 seats on a 6 a.m. flight out of Atlanta. On the plane, she handed him the file. Layla Nasser, born in Aleppo in 2008, naturalized American citizen, daughter of Kareem Nasser, an American reporter of Syrian descent who had worked for Reuters until his death in detention 3 weeks before Ethan's team had crossed the border to recover the family. Yasmin Nasser, the mother, now taught Arabic at Wayne State University in Detroit. Layla had grown up in Dearborn, valedictorian of her high school class, full scholarship to Ann Arbor. Layla did not know the name of the man who had carried her out. Her mother had told her, every year on her birthday, only that he had no name they were allowed to know. She remembered only an American man, silent, who had carried her across sand in the dark. Whitman looked at Ethan over the airline tray. Do you want her to know? Ethan was quiet for a long time. He watched the wing tilt over Tennessee. I want her safe. The rest is hers to decide. In Detroit, they met FBI Special Agent Maria Delgado at the field office. Delgado confirmed the two men following Layla carried Bulgarian passports that had failed the Bureau's first authentication check. They were contracted through a third-party firm based in Cyprus that had been hired through 2 layers of intermediaries by Prater Group. Their assignment, as best Delgado could read it, was reconnaissance, possibly to identify, possibly to pressure, possibly to silence if the indictment in Washington forced classified material into open court. The 3 of them drove up to Ann Arbor in the early afternoon. Whitman met Layla first at a coffee shop on State Street alone. She did not mention Ethan. She introduced herself as an Army liaison officer assisting with her safety. Ethan walked in 10 minutes later. Layla was 18 years old, small, and her hands wrapped around the paper cup in front of her like she was warming them at a fire. She looked at him. 1 full second. She did not cry. She set the cup down very carefully. My mother told me about you on every birthday, she said. Her English carried only the faintest trace of an accent. She said the people had no name. I did not think I would ever meet you. I came because you are in danger, Ethan said. Not because you needed to meet me. That is also fine. She reached into her phone case and pulled out a photograph she had clearly been carrying for years. The one her mother had kept. A man with his back to the camera, carrying a small child, lit from behind by the headlights of an idling Humvee. The desert blacked out beyond the light. She handed him the phone. He held it. He looked. He set it down without speaking. Whitman beside him did not interrupt. She watched Ethan, and she watched Layla, and for the first time she understood the shape of what he had been carrying for 9 years. They walked Layla back toward her dorm. At the corner of State and North University, Whitman's phone vibrated. Delgado, 2 of our subjects entered the parking structure adjacent to her dorm 3 minutes ago. Armed, 2147. The parking structure was 3 stories of poured concrete and humming sodium lights. Ethan, Whitman, Delgado, and a 4-officer FBI tactical team moved into position. Layla was already in motion to a safe house 8 miles north. Whitman had made the call hard and fast in the alley behind the dorm. Layla had pushed back, wanting to stay, and Whitman had not given. They were not going to do this near her. The 2 contractors waited in a rented black SUV on the 2nd level, pistols stowed below the dashboard. They were watching the elevator. They did not know she was gone. Delgado took the lead. The bureau team closed from 2 angles. Ethan and Whitman moved into a backup position near the north stair to cut a retreat. Ethan did not carry a weapon. He had no legal standing to. Whitman carried her service sidearm. Ethan watched the angles and spoke quiet adjustments into the earpiece Delgado had given him. The first contractor saw the flashlight discipline of a federal approach, opened the driver's door, and pulled. The agent at the front called the warning. The contractor raised the pistol. In the 0.8 of a second between the warning and the trigger, Ethan moved. He stepped into Whitman, put a hand on the side of her vest, and brought her down behind the concrete column, not because she would not have moved, because the angle of the contractor's pistol was tracking on her first. The lead agent shot the contractor through the thigh. The man went down behind the open door. The second contractor came out of the passenger side with his hands up, and the agents had him on his face in under 5 seconds. 21:52. No one was dead. Whitman and Ethan stayed behind the column for another breath. She was breathing fast. His hand had come to rest on her shoulder without him deciding it had. 1 second. He took it away. You didn't have to put me down, she said. I saw him, I know. But you have a brother flying out of Ramstein who needs his sister to come home. She looked at him. She did not answer with words. She put her hand on his forearm once, briefly, right above the wrist, and then stood up. 22:45. FBI safe house, Low Brick Ranch, north of town. Layla, Whitman, Ethan, Delgado at the kitchen table. Layla asked the obvious question. Who sent them? We're tracing, Delgado said. It leads back through Prater. The indictment in Washington is going to break on the front page tomorrow, if the United States Attorney's Office gets the filing in on time. Layla looked at Ethan. Will you go home? In the morning. Can I call you? Sometimes. Ethan looked at Whitman. Whitman nodded once. Ethan turned back. Yes. 3:14 in the morning. He could not sleep. He stepped out onto the back porch of the safe house. Whitman was already there, wrapped in a wool blanket, one cushion away on the wicker bench. She did not speak. They watched the lawn. After 10 minutes, she said, "Lily is asleep." Mrs. Patterson sent a picture. She held out her phone. He took it. He looked at the photograph of his 8-year-old daughter curled around a stuffed horse. He gave the phone back. He set it on the bench between them. Their hands lay near each other on the cushion. They did not touch. A train sounded somewhere east of the safe house. The horn carried over the empty lawn and into the trees beyond. Whitman pulled the blanket higher on her shoulders. After a while, she said, "My mother used to tell me, when I was small, that the worst nights are the ones when you stop being afraid of the thing you came for, and you start being afraid of yourself." Ethan looked at the bench between them. He did not answer for a long time. "She was right," he said. The Washington Post hit the news cycle at 4 in the morning Eastern Time. The front page headline ran above the fold. Defense contractor Prater Group indicted on 47 counts of trafficking classified records. 9 defendants. Cooperating witness named in the third paragraph. Lieutenant Colonel Bradford Hayes, retired. What was not in the indictment was Ethan's name, Layla's name. Operation Iron Wren. Holloway and the Justice Department had worked through the night to ensure that the identity protection on every living operator and every recovered hostage held. The contractors arrested in the parking structure were linked, through 72 hours of bureau work, to a small intermediary in Detroit, run by a former Syrian intelligence officer who had been quietly trying to erase evidence that Kareem Nasser had ever cooperated with the American government. The intermediary was rolled up. The threat against Layla was assessed as terminated. Ethan and Whitman stayed one more day in Michigan to confirm Layla was safe. Yasmin Nasser drove up from Detroit that afternoon. For the first time in 9 years, Yasmin and Ethan sat in the same room. She did not say thank you. She set a small box of halawa on the kitchen counter in front of him and rested her hand on the box for 1 second, and that was the entire conversation. When Yasmin left, she did not look back. Layla walked her mother to the car and stood in the driveway until the taillights turned out of sight. Then she came back inside and sat down on the floor next to Ethan's chair, the way she had not done since she was 9 years old. And she did not say anything either. At Fort Moore, Lieutenant Cade walked into Brennan's office and stood at attention. He had read the indictment that morning. He had read the parts that mentioned Hayes by name. He had read the parts that did not mention anyone else, and he had drawn his own conclusions. "Master Sergeant, I'm requesting reassignment from the Major Combat Operations track to the instructor track. I want to learn from Mr. Marsh when he returns." Brennan looked at him for a long time. "On time, Lieutenant. The first lesson is humility." That evening, Brennan called Whitman from the office phone. He had pulled one more thing from the archive, he said. A photograph taken 3 days after Iron Wren, classified, never released. The photograph showed a hospital corridor in Erbil, and in the corner, holding a child wrapped in a blanket, was a man whose face was blurred by motion. Brennan said he would not share the file. He just wanted her to know it existed. Whitman thanked him and hung up and sat in her office for a long time. The morning of the flight, Ethan walked the perimeter of the safe house once before sunrise. Old habit, he checked the line of sight from the back fence to the porch, and from the porch to the gate, and from the gate to the driveway. He found nothing. He went inside, started the coffee, and waited for Whitman to come down. The afternoon of the third day, Ethan and Whitman flew back to Atlanta. On the plane, she handed him a new envelope. The contract had been revised. 3 days a week instead of 4. No requirement to leave Columbus. The teaching scope was narrowed to captains and above. Holloway had signed the modification himself. "Why 3? Ethan asked. "Because Lily is 8, and she needs her dad on Thursday nights." He looked at the envelope a long time. He signed, "In Atlanta, baggage claim, near silence." Whitman drove him the 110 miles down to Columbus. When she pulled to the curb in front of 412 Sycamore Street, she shut off the engine. "Come in for coffee?" he asked. "Not yet. Lily should meet me in the morning. Not on the night her dad gets home from 3 days gone. Next weekend, she drove off. He stood on the porch and watched the taillights, then turned and unlocked the door. Lily came out of the kitchen at a run and wrapped both arms around his legs. 2 weeks later, Hayes signed a plea deal in federal court in Alexandria. 4 years, full cooperation. 6 other Prater executives were indicted on related counts. The Justice Department recovered every ghost roster the firm had assembled and worked with the Department of Defense to reseal the underlying records. Layla called Ethan once a week. The first time she called, Lily answered the kitchen phone by accident and ran it to him. "Dad." "Who is the girl?" "A grown-up friend of Dad's. Her name is Layla. Does she draw horses?" Ethan laughed. "I'll ask." The next call, before she said anything else, Layla said, "I do not draw horses, but I will learn." Whitman started coming around the house. Not often. Every other Saturday afternoon, usually. She did not try to be anyone in particular. She sat on the porch and read while Lily drew. She helped Ethan replace 2 warped boards on the back fence. She brought a tin of cookies once. Lily decided she liked them. One Saturday, she brought her father's old field manual, the one her mother had kept on the shelf above the television for 20 years. She let Lily turn the pages. Lily did not read most of it. She found the diagrams of compass bearings and asked which way her father's truck was pointed in the driveway. Ethan came out with 3 glasses of lemonade and told her north. Lily wrote the letter N in the dirt by the porch step with the end of a stick. One afternoon, sitting in the grass with a black-eyed Susan in her hand, Lily looked up at Whitman. "Are you Dad's girlfriend?" Whitman did not flinch. "I don't know. Your dad and I are getting to know each other. What do you think about that?" Lily tilted her head and considered the question with the seriousness only an 8-year-old can bring to it. "My mom told my dad before she went that he could love somebody again if he wanted to. I heard her. She said, 'I will not be jealous.'" Whitman looked away for a second. When she looked back, her eyes were a little wet, but her voice held steady. "Your mom was a very strong person." Ethan stood in the kitchen doorway. He had heard the whole thing. He did not come outside. He turned around and went to the sink and stood there for a long minute. Ethan taught his first class at Fort Moore the following Monday. 12 students, captains and majors, including Vega and Cade in the back row. He set his coffee on the lectern and opened the binder. "I'm going to teach you how to move and how to shoot and how to make a decision in less than a second. But the thing I want you to remember most is this. Technique only matters when it serves something larger than you. Without that, you are just a man with a rifle. And the world already has too many men with rifles." Vega took notes. Cade nodded slowly. Brennan stood at the back of the room and smiled. After class, Cade lingered until the others had filed out. He approached the lectern with his cover under his arm. "Sir." "About the morning of the run." Ethan looked up. "You don't owe me anything for that, Lieutenant. Pay your debts forward." Cade nodded once, sharp, and left. 6 weeks after Holloway shook his hand on the parade field, Saturday morning, the front yard of 412 Sycamore Street, the old sycamore moved its leaves in a small breeze. Lily, in a sundress with horses printed across the hem, sat on the steps with a sketch pad. Whitman arrived at 10, a box of donuts in one hand and a hardcover book about Arabian horses in the other. Lily opened the door, hugged her the first time, and pulled her by the wrist out into the yard to show off the new drawing. 4 figures under a single tree. "That's Dad. That's you. That's Layla. That's me." Whitman looked at the drawing for a long moment. Ethan stood in the doorway, silent. At 10:45, a video call. Layla, from her dorm room in Ann Arbor. She had drawn a horse, clumsy, lopsided, with one leg longer than the others, and she held it up to the screen. Lily clapped. Layla laughed. The two of them talked for 15 minutes about horses and college dining halls and what Dearborn was like. Ethan and Whitman sat behind the laptop and did not interrupt. At the end of the call, Layla held the phone closer to her face and spoke directly to Ethan. "I changed my major from pre-med to history. My mother is not happy. But I think I want to write about my father one day. I wanted you to know first." Ethan watched her on the small screen for a beat. "Your father would be proud of either choice." Layla nodded once and ended the call. After the call ended, Lily took her crayons back out to the yard. Ethan and Whitman sat on the porch, 2 cups of coffee on the small table between them. "Holloway told me yesterday," Whitman said, Late this month, there's a memorial for the 10th anniversary of Iron Ren. Private. 9 people on the list. You're invited. I'll go if you come with me. That's not my mission, Marsh. I'm not asking as Major. I'm asking as Ethan. She looked at him. For the first time in everything that had happened since the parade field, she put her hand on his hand, and she did not take it away. Then I'll come. A long quiet. Lily was singing something under her breath in the yard, a song about a brown horse and a barn. Mrs. Patterson's laugh carried from her own backyard across the hedge. Sarah told me before she went, Ethan said. She did not need me to live for her. She needed me to keep living. I did not understand for 3 years. I think I am starting to. Whitman did not answer. She tightened her hand on his once, then let her fingers rest on top of his on the table. From the kitchen window behind them, the morning sun caught the edge of a framed photograph on the wall. Sarah, on the day they had brought Lily home from the hospital, holding the baby in a thin cotton blanket and laughing at something off camera. Whitman had seen the photograph the second time she visited, and she had not commented on it. Ethan had noticed her not commenting, and he had been grateful. The sun moved past the high branches of the sycamore. Lily ran up the steps with 2 drawings. Will you mail one to Layla? Whitman nodded. She took the drawing. Lily handed the second one to her father. On Sycamore Street, where the wind moved soft through the old branches, and an 8-year-old's drawings hung in every window, a quiet man finally understood the difference between surviving a war and surviving a promise. And for the first time in 9 years, he was carrying neither alone.